Ukrainians, all Europeans, and everyone in the world who believes that terror should have no place on earth. Why is the biggest source of terror in the world, Russia, still able to wage this war? And why can it wage the war so cruelly and cynically? There is only one reason: insufficient pressure on Russia. The response to the terror of this state is insufficient. Just look at what Russia can afford. No other terrorist has ever done this in history. So many sins at once. Radiation terror at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. 6 power units. The presence of Russian troops at the plant, constant Russian provocations and shelling of the plant territory alone put Ukraine and all of Europe on the brink of a radiation disaster. Energy terror. Residents of many countries around the world are suffering due to the painful increase in prices for energy resources, for electricity, for heat. Russia does it deliberately. It deliberately destabilizes the gas market in Europe. With its strikes, it deliberately limits our Ukrainian ability to export electricity to Europe. The export of electricity from Ukraine could alleviate the severity of the energy crisis in Europe, in the same way that the export of our food relieves the severity of the food crisis in the world. Hunger terror is a very cynical and completely deliberate tactic of Russia, and it is directed not just against poor countries, but especially against those regions of the world who wish a new inflow of refugees may come to Europe. Severe migrant crisis in Europe. This is the calculation of the terrorist state. Fortunately, together with our partners, together with the UN, Turkey, we managed to achieve an export grain initiative. Russia was forced to unblock our ports, but now it is threatening to blockade it again. And how does the world react? There is still no official recognition of Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Citizens of the terrorist state can still travel to Europe for vacation or shopping. They can still get European visas, and no one knows whether there are torturers or murderers among them who have just returned from the occupied territory of Ukraine. Until now, Russian propagandists can still work precisely in those countries of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Europe, which are threatened with the greatest chaos due to price and energy crisis created by Russia. We are still forced to ask for help in protecting our skies from Russian missiles after 200 days of full-scale war. On September the 11th and the 12th, the Russian army struck the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians found themselves in the dark, without electricity, houses, hospitals and schools, communal infrastructure. Russian missiles hit precisely those objects that have absolutely nothing to do with the infrastructure of the armed forces of our country. On the one hand, this is a sign of the desperation of those who invented this war. This is how they react to the defeat of Russian troops in the Kharkiv region. They can't do anything to our heroes on the battlefield, and that's why Russia is directing its vile strikes against civilian infrastructure. On the other hand, Russia is trying to prevent us from directing Ukraine's capabilities in such a way as to stabilize the situation in Europe. Our electricity export is something that Russia is very afraid of right now, because we can disrupt Russian plans to empty the pockets of Europeans this winter due to crazy energy prices. We still need to strengthen our cooperation in order to overcome Russian terror. Russia must be designated a terrorist state. Strengthen sanctions. The 8th EU sanctions package is needed. Increase aid to Ukraine and, above all, speed up the provision of air defense systems. I am grateful to all the rescuers who fought the consequences of Russian missile strikes at energy facilities. Hundreds of settlements in several regions of Ukraine were cut off due to these strikes. At the request of the Minister of Internal Affairs, on September the 12th, I would like to especially note the contribution to the stabilization of the situation of Major General of the Civil Protection Service Alexander Volobuyev, Colonel of the Civil Protection Service Alexander Mislavsky, Senior Lieutenant of the Civil Protection Service Vitaly Dziabko, Ensign of the Civil Protection Service Denis Kostenko, and Fireman Ensign Alexander Guli. Thank you. I am grateful to you and your colleagues. The energy supply of the Dnipropetrovsk region, Poltava region, Sumy region, Kharkiv region and the city of Kharkiv was restored. But this day, on September the 12th, there are new strikes at energy facilities, new blackouts in Kharkiv, and we must be aware that the meanness of Russian terrorists knows no bounds. They will try to make such a form of terror systematic. On my behalf, the Prime Minister of Ukraine held a meeting on September the 12th with the Minister of Energy, the Minister of Territories and Communities Development of Ukraine, the Ministry of Finance and Naftogaz. A coordinating headquarters will be formed quickly to respond to all such manifestations of Russian terror. Funds will also be allocated for the restoration of damaged objects and for assistance to the deoccupied territories. From the beginning of September until this day, our warriors have already liberated more than 6,000 square kilometers of the territory of Ukraine in the east and south. The movement of our troops continues. I am thankful to the 57th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade, which has recovered from heavy fighting in the east and is advancing very bravely, very confidently in the south direction. I am thankful to the 59th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade for steadily moving forward despite everything, despite the features of the open terrain, despite the artillery of the occupiers. I am thankful to the fighters of the 128th Separate Mountain Assault Brigade for the liberation of several settlements and very effective actions to neutralize the enemy's activity. Guys, you are true heroes. Separately, I want to thank our anti-aircraft fighters. The day before, on September 11th, we all saw the consequences of the Russian strikes. But at the same time, most of the terrorist missiles were shot down. 9 of the 12 missiles were shot down. 7 missiles were shot down by warriors of the 138th Dnipro Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade of the East Air Command. And 2 missiles were shot down by the Sky Defenders of the 96th Kiev Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade of the Center Air Command. Thank you, our defenders. Thank you to everyone who fights for Ukraine. Thank you to everyone who is really ready to fight against Russian terror. We bring victory closer every day. Glory to Ukraine.